Welcome to Eternal Philosophies. Today we embark on an extraordinary journey through one of China's most beloved and enduring legends, the epic tale of Sun Wukong, the Monkey King. This is a story that spans centuries, weaving together themes of rebellion, redemption, and enlightenment in ways that continue to captivate audiences worldwide. Chapter 1. The Miraculous Birth and Rise to Leadership. Our story begins in the primordial era, atop the mystical mountain of flowers and fruit, where an ancient stone had stood since the dawn of creation. This was no ordinary rock. It had been nourished by the very essence of heaven and earth, absorbing cosmic energy for countless millennia. Picture this magnificent stone weathered by wind and rain, yet pulsing with an inner light that grew stronger with each passing season. Then, in a moment that would change the course of celestial history, the stone cracked open like a cosmic egg, releasing a brilliant flash of light that pierced the heavens. From within emerged a stone monkey, fully formed and possessed of human-like intelligence. This newborn creature was Sun Wukong, though he would not bear that name for many years to come. The young monkey's eyes immediately sparkled with golden light that shot toward the palace of the pole star, causing even the Jade Emperor himself to take notice of this unusual birth. But as the monkey began to eat and drink from the natural world around him, his divine radiance gradually dimmed to normal levels. Sun Wukong quickly discovered he was not alone on the mountain. The slopes were home to countless other monkeys who initially viewed this strange newcomer with curiosity and caution. However, it didn't take long for his natural charisma and fearless nature to shine through. The pivotal moment came when the monkey tribe faced a challenge that had stumped them for generations. Behind a thundering waterfall lay a hidden cave, but none of the monkeys dared to leap through the cascading water to explore what lay beyond. The roar of the water was deafening, and the force of the falls seemed certain to dash any creature against the rocks below. When Sun Wukong heard his fellow monkeys lamenting their cowardice, he made a bold proclamation. Whoever could successfully pass through the waterfall and return to tell the tale would be declared their king. Without hesitation, the stone monkey took a running leap and plunged through the waterfall. What he discovered beyond was breathtaking, a vast cavern with stone tables, chairs, and beds, as if fashioned by divine hands for a royal court. Stone inscriptions revealed this to be the Water Curtain Cave, destined to be home to those who would find it. When Sun Wukong emerged from behind the falls with news of this paradise, the other monkeys were overjoyed. True to their word, they proclaimed him their king, and he took the title, Handsome Monkey King. For years he ruled this mountain paradise, leading his subjects in play and ensuring their protection from the demons that roamed other parts of the mountain. But even paradise could not quell the growing unrest in the Monkey King's heart. The turning point came during a celebration when one of his oldest and most beloved monkey subjects died of natural causes. As Sun Wukong watched the burial ceremony, a profound melancholy settled over him. For the first time, he truly understood the concept of mortality and was struck by the realization that he too would someday grow old and die. This moment of clarity sparked an insatiable hunger for something greater. The Monkey King declared to his subjects that he would leave their mountain paradise to seek out the secrets of immortality. Despite their protests and tears, he was resolute. Constructing a simple raft from logs and vines, he set sail across the vast ocean, driven by an unshakable determination to conquer death itself. Chapter 2. The Quest for Knowledge and the Acquisition of Power. Sun Wukong's journey across the ocean was fraught with perils that would have claimed the life of any ordinary being. Storms battered his makeshift raft, sea monsters rose from the depths to challenge him, and the sun beat down mercilessly during endless days at sea. Yet his determination never wavered, and eventually, he reached the shores of a distant continent. The first humans he encountered fled in terror at the sight of this strange ape-like creature. Undeterred, Sun Wukong observed them from a distance, learning their ways and eventually stealing clothing left out to dry so he could blend in among them. With his face hidden beneath a hood, he wandered through human settlements, witnessing both the beauty and corruption of mortal society. His wanderings eventually led him to a forest where he overheard a woodcutter singing a peculiar song filled with Taoist wisdom. When questioned, the woodcutter revealed that an immortal master had taught him the song. Following the woodcutter's directions, Sun Wukong found himself before the entrance to the Slanted Moon, 3-star cave. Inside this cave dwelt Patriarch Subodhi, an ancient Taoist master whose wisdom was said to be boundless. The patriarch initially refused to admit the monkey, sensing his wild and unruly nature. But Sun Wukong's persistence was legendary. He waited outside the cave entrance for months, refusing to leave despite hunger, cold, and the master's continued rejections. Finally, impressed by this display of unwavering determination, Patriarch Subodhi relented and allowed the monkey to enter. The master gave him the religious name Sun Wukong, which means monkey awakened to emptiness, symbolizing his potential for spiritual enlightenment. The training that followed was unlike anything Sun Wukong had ever experienced. For the first 6 to 7 years, he learned the basics: human speech, proper etiquette, reading, writing, and even mundane household chores like carrying water, chopping wood, cooking, and cleaning. Though these tasks seemed beneath a being of his ambitions, Patriarch Subodhi explained that mastering these simple activities would develop his coordination, attention to detail, balance, and observational skills, all essential foundations for the greater mysteries to come. When Sun Wukong had proven his dedication through these humble labors, Patriarch Subodhi finally began teaching him the true Taoist arts. The monkey proved to be an extraordinary student, absorbing complex magical techniques with remarkable speed. Most notably, he mastered the 72 transformations, though this was not simply the ability to take on 72 different forms as many believe. Rather, it was a collection of 72 distinct magical abilities, including shape-shifting into any animal or object, controlling the elements, breathing fire, walking on water, making his soul leave his body, withstanding extreme temperatures and manipulating the size of objects. Perhaps even more impressive was his mastery of the somersault cloud, a technique that allowed him to travel 108,000 li, approximately 54,000 kilometers or 34,000 miles, in a single leap. This incredible speed made him one of the fastest beings in existence, capable of crossing vast distances in the blink of an eye. Sun Wukong also learned the way of immortality, achieving several different forms of eternal life that would make him virtually indestructible. His body became incredibly resilient, capable of withstanding tremendous punishment, while maintaining his youthful appearance and strength. However, Patriarch Subodhi grew concerned about his student's growing pride and reckless nature. When Sun Wukong began showing off his abilities to his fellow students, the master realized that the monkey's heart had not yet been properly cultivated. In a stern warning, Patriarch Subodhi told Sun Wukong that his arrogance would eventually lead to great trouble, and that when that day came, the monkey must never reveal where he had learned his powers. With this ominous prophecy, the master banished Sun Wukong from the cave, sending him back into the world. Chapter 3: The Mighty Staff and Early Rebellions. Returning to his mountain kingdom after years of absence, Sun Wukong found his monkey subjects terrorized by a demon called the Demon King of Confusion. The reunion was bittersweet. While his people rejoiced at their king's return, they also wept as they recounted the suffering they had endured. Sun Wukong's rage was terrible to behold, and he immediately set out to confront the demon. The battle was swift and decisive. Using his newly acquired powers, Sun Wukong easily defeated the Demon King of Confusion, but he realized that his current weapon, a simple sword taken from the demon, was inadequate for a being of his strength and abilities. He needed a weapon worthy of his power. This need led him to the underwater palace of Aoguang, the Dragon King of the Eastern Sea. The Dragon King, recognizing Sun Wukong's supernatural nature, initially tried to appease him with various magical weapons from his armory. Spears, halberds, and swords weighing thousands of pounds each were brought forth, but none could withstand the Monkey King's strength. It was the Dragon Queen who suggested they offer Sun Wukong the ancient iron pillar that had been taking up space in their treasury. This massive column, black as night and 20 feet tall with the width of a barrel, had an illustrious history. It was originally used by Yu the Great, the legendary emperor who controlled the Great Flood, to measure the depths of the world's waters. The pillar had been forged from a special black iron and possessed magical properties that had remained dormant for centuries. The moment Sun Wukong approached the pillar, it began to glow with an inner light, responding to his presence. When he grasped it and expressed a wish that it were smaller and more manageable, the pillar immediately shrank to a size that fit perfectly in his hands. It was then that he noticed the golden bands around each end and the inscription along its surface. The compliant golden hooped rod. Weight, 13,500 caddies. This translated to approximately 17,550 pounds, or nearly 8,000 kilograms. The staff, now known as the Ruyi Jingu Bang, possessed extraordinary abilities. It could change its size according to Sun Wukong's will, growing large enough to support the heavens, or shrinking to the size of a needle that he could store behind his ear. Despite its tremendous weight, it felt light as a feather in his hands, and it could multiply itself for use in battle. The weapon would respond instantly to his mental commands, fighting independently when needed. Armed with this legendary weapon, Sun Wukong's confidence soared to new heights. He began making increasingly bold demands of the Dragon Kings of the Four Seas, essentially extorting a complete set of magical armor from them. This included a golden chainmail shirt, a phoenix feathered cap, and cloud-walking boots that allowed him to walk on air as easily as on solid ground. But even these acquisitions could not satisfy Sun Wukong's growing ambitions. In an act of supreme arrogance, he descended to the underworld and demanded to see the Book of Life and Death, the cosmic ledger that recorded the fate of every mortal being. Using his incredible speed and strength, he overpowered the guards and bureaucrats of the underworld, finally locating the section that contained his name and those of his monkey subjects. With bold strokes of his brush, Sun Wukong erased his name and those of all the monkeys on his mountain, effectively granting them all immortality by removing them from the cycle of death. This brazen act sent shockwaves through the celestial bureaucracy, as it represented a direct challenge to the natural order of the universe. The Dragon Kings and the rulers of the underworld immediately filed complaints with the Jade Emperor, the supreme ruler of heaven. They described Sun Wukong's outrageous behavior and demanded that action be taken to control this rebellious monkey who was disrupting the cosmic order. Chapter 4. Heavenly Appointments and Growing Rebellion. The Jade Emperor, ruler of the celestial bureaucracy, found himself in a delicate position. Sun Wukong's actions had clearly violated heavenly law, but his power was undeniable. After consulting with his advisors, the Jade Emperor decided on a strategy of appeasement rather than direct confrontation. If the monkey desired recognition and status, perhaps he could be controlled by bringing him into the heavenly hierarchy. Thus, Sun Wukong received an imperial summons to ascend to heaven. Flattered by this apparent recognition of his worth, he eagerly accepted the invitation. Upon arriving at the celestial palace, he was given the official title of Keeper of the Heavenly Horses, a position that came with a modest palace and a small staff of subordinates. Initially, Sun Wukong threw himself into his duties with enthusiasm. He revolutionized the care of the celestial steeds, developing new feeding techniques and training methods that made the horses stronger and more beautiful than ever before. His dedication was absolute. He rarely left the stables, working day and night to prove his worth. However, this blissful ignorance came to an abrupt end when he finally thought to ask about his position within the heavenly hierarchy. The response devastated him. Keeper of the Heavenly Horses was actually one of the lowest possible positions in heaven, barely above that of a servant. It was essentially a joke appointment, a way to keep him busy with menial tasks, while the real celestial officials conducted important business. Sun Wukong's rage was volcanic. Feeling deeply humiliated and deceived, he destroyed the celestial stables, released all the horses, and stormed out of heaven in a fury. Returning to his mountain kingdom, he proclaimed himself the great sage, equal of heaven, demanding that this title be recognized by the celestial authorities. The Jade Emperor was initially inclined to send armies to suppress this rebellion, but his advisors suggested a different approach. They reasoned that granting Sun Wukong an empty title might be less costly than a war, especially given his demonstrated powers. Thus, he was recalled to heaven and given the grandiose title he had demanded, though it came with no real authority or responsibilities. For a time, this arrangement seemed to work. Sun Wukong was content to enjoy the prestige of his impressive title, spending his days exploring the celestial realm and socializing with other immortals. However, his restless nature eventually led him to seek new challenges. The opportunity came when the Jade Emperor appointed him guardian of the Peach Garden, home to the peaches of immortality. These miraculous fruits were among heaven's greatest treasures. The trees in the garden bore fruit on different cycles. Some ripened every 3,000 years and granted 300 years of extended life. Others ripened every 6,000 years and granted immortality to mortals. And the most precious ripened every 9,000 years and granted eternal youth and spiritual power equal to heaven and earth themselves. Sun Wukong was initially diligent in his duties, but the temptation of the peaches proved too great. He began by sampling just one of the smaller fruits, rationalizing that he needed to ensure their quality. However, once he experienced their incredible power and delicious taste, his restraint crumbled entirely. Soon he was consuming the peaches regularly, working his way up to the most precious fruits that should have been reserved for only the highest-ranking celestial beings. The final insult came when Sun Wukong discovered that he had not been invited to the Peach Banquet, a grand celebration hosted by the Queen Mother of the West. This festival was the social event of the celestial calendar, attended by all the important gods, immortals, and celestial officials. The fact that he, despite his impressive title, had been excluded made it clear that he was still considered an outsider and an inferior. Consumed by indignation, Sun Wukong decided to crash the party in the most dramatic way possible. Using his shape-shifting abilities, he disguised himself as one of the invited immortals and infiltrated the banquet. Once inside, he used his powers to freeze all the guests in place, leaving him free to consume the elaborate feast that had been prepared. But Sun Wukong didn't stop there. After gorging himself on the celestial delicacies, he made his way to Lao Zi's alchemy laboratory, where the sage kept his most precious elixirs. These included pills of immortality, potions that granted various supernatural abilities, and the legendary 9-turn golden elixir that took thousands of years to create. Sun Wukong consumed them all, adding yet another layer of immortality and power to his already formidable abilities. By the time the paralysis wore off and the guests discovered what had happened, Sun Wukong had already fled back to his mountain kingdom. The celestial court was in an uproar. Never before had anyone shown such blatant disrespect for heavenly authority. The Jade Emperor's patience had finally reached its limit. Chapter 5: The Great Celestial War. The Jade Emperor's response to Sun Wukong's latest outrages was swift and overwhelming. He assembled the greatest military force in heavenly history, 100,000 celestial warriors, the 28 constellations, powerful star gods who served as heaven's elite forces, the 4 heavenly kings who guarded the cardinal directions, and Prince Neja, a legendary warrior deity known for his combat prowess. Leading this massive army was Erlang Shen, the Jade Emperor's nephew, and one of heaven's most formidable champions. Erlang possessed a third eye in the center of his forehead that could see through any deception, making him particularly well-suited to counter Sun Wukong's shape-shifting abilities. He was accompanied by his celestial hound and his sworn brothers, the 7 sages of Plum Mountain. The battle that followed was unlike anything the cosmos had ever witnessed. Sun Wukong met this vast army with cunning and power that defied belief. Using his mastery of the 72 transformations, he could become anything. A giant to match the largest warriors, a tiny insect to avoid detection, or even inanimate objects to confuse his enemies. His most spectacular technique involved his hair. Sun Wukong possessed 84,000 hairs on his body, each one capable of being transformed into whatever he desired. He would pluck handfuls of these hairs, chew them up, and spit them out while shouting, "Transform." Instantly, he would be surrounded by thousands of copies of himself, each wielding a copy of his mighty staff and possessing a fraction of his power. The sight of these monkey armies engaging the celestial forces was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. The real Sun Wukong would dart between battlefields on his somersault cloud, appearing wherever the fighting was thickest. His staff would grow to enormous proportions, sweeping aside entire formations of celestial soldiers, then shrink to normal size for precise combat against individual opponents. Even Erlang Shen, with all his power and tactical genius, found himself evenly matched. Their personal duel lasted for hours, with both warriors pushing their abilities to their absolute limits. Sun Wukong would transform into various animals to gain advantages, becoming a giant rock to attack from above, a fish to escape into water, or a sparrow to dart through small spaces. But Erlang's divine eye allowed him to see through these disguises and counter with his own transformations. The battle reached its climax when Laozi, the supreme Taoist sage, entered the fray. From his position high above the battlefield, he hurled his diamond jade bracelet with perfect precision. The bracelet struck Sun Wukong just as he was engaged in close combat with Erlang, stunning him long enough for the celestial forces to finally overwhelm him. Captured at last, Sun Wukong was brought before the Jade Emperor for judgment. The charges against him were unprecedented: theft of celestial treasures, assault on heavenly officials, destruction of property, and rebellion against the cosmic order. The sentence was death, but executing Sun Wukong proved to be easier said than done. First, they tried to behead him, but the celestial executioner's sword shattered against his neck. They attempted to pierce him with spears, but the weapons broke against his skin. Lightning strikes intended to incinerate him were absorbed harmlessly. Even attempts to burn him alive failed, as the flames could not penetrate his magically reinforced body. Finally, Laozi suggested using his 8 trigrams furnace, a mystical crucible used for refining elixirs and metals. The theory was that the sacred fires within the furnace, burning at temperatures beyond mortal comprehension, would reduce Sun Wukong to ash. The Monkey King was sealed inside the furnace, and the fires were stoked for 49 days. But Sun Wukong's survival instincts and knowledge of Taoist principles served him well. He remembered that the 8 trigrams furnace was divided into 8 sections, each corresponding to a different element. The section marked by the wind trigram contained no fire, providing him with a space where he could avoid the worst of the flames. For 49 days he endured the intense heat, smoke, and spiritual pressure of the furnace. The experience was agonizing, but it also transformed him in unexpected ways. When the furnace was finally opened, instead of finding ashes, the celestial court witnessed Sun Wukong leap out more powerful than ever. The furnace had failed to destroy him, but it had changed him. The smoke and mystical fires had affected his eyes, giving him his famous fiery eyes and golden pupils, a supernatural vision that allowed him to see through any illusion, detect the true nature of demons and spirits, and perceive things hidden from normal sight. This ability would prove crucial in his later adventures. Enraged by his treatment and empowered by his ordeal, Sun Wukong began his most audacious assault yet. He fought his way through the celestial palace, his staff growing to enormous proportions as he smashed through defenses and scattered the heavenly armies. His goal was clear. He intended to overthrow the Jade Emperor himself and claim the throne of heaven. Chapter 6: The Buddha's Intervention and Divine Punishment. As Sun Wukong rampaged through the highest levels of heaven, panic gripped the celestial court. The Jade Emperor, for the first time in his eternal reign, found himself genuinely threatened. No weapon could harm the Monkey King, no army could stop him, and his power seemed to grow with each victory. In desperation, the Jade Emperor sent messengers to seek help from the Buddha himself. The Buddha, residing in his Western paradise, received these pleas with serene compassion. He understood that Sun Wukong's rebellion represented more than mere defiance. It was a manifestation of unchecked ego and the dangers of power without wisdom. Agreeing to intervene, the Buddha traveled to heaven to confront the raging Monkey King. The meeting between these two titanic figures took place in the ruins of the celestial throne room. Sun Wukong, still drunk on his victories and convinced of his own invincibility, boasted of his achievements, and declared his intention to claim the Jade Emperor's throne. He proclaimed himself the rightful ruler of heaven, earth, and all the realms between. The Buddha listened to these claims with infinite patience before making a simple proposition. If Sun Wukong could demonstrate his power by jumping out of the Buddha's palm, then the Enlightened One would support his claim to the celestial throne. However, if the monkey failed, he would submit to whatever punishment the Buddha deemed appropriate. Sun Wukong laughed at what seemed like an absurdly easy challenge. The Buddha's palm, while large, appeared to be only about the size of a lotus leaf. Given his ability to travel 108,000 li in a single somersault, escaping from such a small space seemed trivial. With supreme confidence, Sun Wukong leaped into the Buddha's palm and immediately launched himself skyward with his most powerful somersault. He flew at tremendous speed, colors blurring past him as he traveled toward what he believed to be the edge of the universe. Finally, he came to rest before 5 massive pillars, each one reaching up beyond sight. Convinced that these pillars marked the boundary of all existence, Sun Wukong decided to leave proof of his journey. He wrote, "The great sage, equal of heaven, was here, on one of the pillars, and in a display of crude humor, urinated at the base of another." Satisfied with his triumph, he somersaulted back to where the Buddha waited. Upon his return, Sun Wukong demanded that the Buddha honor their agreement and support his claim to rule heaven. But the Buddha merely smiled and held up his hand. There, on the middle finger, were the very words Sun Wukong had written, still wet with ink. The base of the Buddha's thumb reeked of monkey urine. The terrible truth dawned on Sun Wukong. He had never left the Buddha's palm at all. What he had perceived as the pillars at the edge of the universe were actually the Buddha's 5 fingers. His mighty somersault, which could carry him across the cosmos, had been contained within the space of a single hand. Before Sun Wukong could react to this revelation, the Buddha acted. He overturned his hand and thrust it out of the gates of heaven, sending it earthward with tremendous force. As the hand descended, it transformed into a massive mountain, the 5 Elements Mountain, composed of earth, water, fire, metal, and wood. Sun Wukong found himself trapped beneath this enormous peak, his body pinned by its immense weight. The mountain was not merely physical, but spiritual, representing the fundamental forces of existence itself. No amount of strength could move it. No transformation could free him from its grip. To ensure that the imprisonment would be permanent, the Buddha placed a sacred talisman on the peak of the mountain. This seal, inscribed with the powerful mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, bound Sun Wukong's powers and prevented any escape. The talisman would remain in place until someone pure of heart came to remove it. As the Buddha prepared to depart, he made a final pronouncement. Sun Wukong would remain imprisoned until he learned humility and wisdom. Only when he had truly changed his heart and submitted to a higher purpose would he be freed. The sentence was not merely punishment, but an opportunity for spiritual growth. With Sun Wukong secured beneath 5 Elements Mountain, peace returned to heaven. The Jade Emperor's rule was restored, the celestial bureaucracy resumed its normal functions, and the cosmic order was re-established. But far below, trapped and alone, the once mighty Monkey King began the longest and most difficult period of his existence. Chapter 7. 5 Centuries of Solitude and Reflection. For 500 years, Sun Wukong remained imprisoned beneath 5 Elements Mountain. This was not merely physical confinement, but a period of profound spiritual trial. The mountain's weight pressed down upon him constantly, a reminder of his powerlessness against forces greater than himself. During the early years of his imprisonment, Sun Wukong raged against his fate. He used every ounce of his strength trying to lift the mountain, employed all his transformations in attempts to escape, and called upon his somersault cloud countless times, only to find that none of his powers could overcome the Buddha's binding. The sacred talisman on the mountain's peak glowed whenever he tried to use his abilities, sending waves of spiritual energy that suppressed his magic. As decades turned to centuries, Sun Wukong's fury gradually gave way to deeper contemplation. He began to understand that his imprisonment was not merely punishment for his crimes, but an opportunity to confront the arrogance and selfishness that had led to his downfall. The solitude forced him to examine his actions and motivations in ways he had never done before. Local spirits and minor deities would occasionally visit him, some out of curiosity, others out of compassion. Through these interactions, Sun Wukong began to learn about the world beyond his mountain prison. He heard stories of human suffering and kindness, of mortals who struggled with the same pride and anger that had consumed him. Gradually, he developed a new perspective on the nature of power and responsibility. The physical hardships of his imprisonment were considerable. He was sustained by iron pills when hungry and molten copper when thirsty, just enough to keep him alive but hardly pleasant. Weather provided no relief. In summer, the mountain trapped heat like an oven, while winter brought freezing winds that cut through his fur. Yet these discomforts paled beside the spiritual anguish of confronting his own failures. As the centuries passed, Sun Wukong began to experience something he had never known before: genuine remorse. He saw how his pride had hurt not only himself, but also his monkey subjects, who had suffered in his absence. He recognized that his rebellion against heaven, while born from legitimate grievances, had been motivated more by ego than by any desire for justice. This period of reflection was not wasted. Sun Wukong began to practice meditation, drawing upon the Taoist principles Patriarch Subodhi had taught him centuries earlier. He cultivated patience, humility, and compassion, virtues that had been foreign to his nature before. The arrogant monkey king who had demanded to be worshipped as the equal of heaven slowly transformed into a being capable of genuine spiritual growth. Chapter 8: The Monk's Mission and Liberation. In the Tang Dynasty capital of Chang'an, a momentous event was taking place that would change the course of both earthly and celestial history. Emperor Taizong, one of China's greatest rulers, had received a divine vision instructing him to send a mission to India to retrieve the sacred Buddhist scriptures. These texts, known as the Tripitaka or Three Baskets, contained the essential teachings of Buddhism that could bring enlightenment and salvation to the Chinese people. The emperor chose for this sacred mission a monk named Xuanzang, though he would become better known by his religious title, Tang Sanzang. This choice was not made lightly. Tang Sanzang was recognized as one of the most learned and virtuous monks in the entire empire. His understanding of Buddhist doctrine was profound, his character was beyond reproach, and his dedication to the Dharma was absolute. The historical Xuanzang was indeed a remarkable figure. Born in 602 CE, he had become a monk at a young age and had spent decades studying the Buddhist texts available in China. However, he had become increasingly troubled by inconsistencies and gaps in the Chinese translations of Indian Buddhist works. Determined to access the original Sanskrit texts, he had defied imperial law and embarked on a dangerous 17-year journey to India, returning with over 650 sacred texts. In the novel Journey to the West, Tang Sanzang is portrayed as the reincarnation of Golden Cicada, a disciple of the Buddha who had been sent to Earth to undergo trials that would perfect his spiritual development. His mission to retrieve the scriptures was thus both a historical necessity and a cosmic test of his enlightenment. As Tang Sanzang began his westward journey, he was guided by Guanyin, the Bodhisattva of mercy. This compassionate deity had been tasked by the Buddha himself with ensuring the success of the scripture retrieval mission. Guanyin understood that the journey would be fraught with dangers that no mortal monk could survive alone. Therefore, she had already identified 3 beings who would serve as Tang Sanzang's protectors, each of them seeking redemption for past sins. The first of these protectors was Sun Wukong, still trapped beneath 5 Elements Mountain. When Tang Sanzang's journey brought him to the base of the mountain, he heard a voice calling from beneath the stone. Following the sound, he discovered Sun Wukong, who had been waiting 5 centuries for this moment of liberation. The meeting between the monk and the Monkey King was charged with spiritual significance. Sun Wukong, transformed by his long imprisonment, no longer demanded freedom as a right, but humbly requested it as an opportunity to serve. He explained that Guanyin had visited him years earlier, promising that he would be freed when someone came who could remove the Buddha's talisman. Tang Sanzang, moved by the prisoner's apparent sincerity and guided by his compassionate nature, climbed to the peak of Five Elements Mountain. There he found the sacred talisman, still glowing with divine power after 5 centuries. As his pure hands touched the seal, it crumbled to dust, and immediately the mountain began to shake. With a sound like thunder, Five Elements Mountain split apart, and Sun Wukong emerged. But the being who stood before Tang Sanzang was markedly different from the arrogant rebel who had challenged heaven. His eyes still held their golden fire, and his strength remained legendary, but there was a new quality of restraint and wisdom in his bearing. Sun Wukong immediately knelt before Tang Sanzang, acknowledging him as his master and swearing to protect him on the journey to the west. This act of submission, impossible for the old Sun Wukong, demonstrated how profoundly the centuries of imprisonment had changed him. However, Guanyin had anticipated that Sun Wukong's transformation might not be complete. As insurance against any return to his old rebellious ways, she provided Tang Sanzang with a special circlet of gold. This magical headband, when placed upon Sun Wukong's head, could not be removed by any power. More importantly, when Tang Sanzang recited a specific sutra known as the tight fillet spell, the circlet would contract, causing excruciating pain. The headband represented a test of trust between master and disciple. Tang Sanzang would need to have faith that Sun Wukong's repentance was genuine, while Sun Wukong would need to accept this symbol of his continued accountability. It was a reminder that true freedom comes not from the absence of restraint, but from the willing choice to do good. Chapter 9. Gathering the Disciples. As Tang Sanzang and Sun Wukong continued their westward journey, they encountered the second being destined to join their pilgrimage. In a place called Gao Village, they found the locals terrorized by a pig demon who had been masquerading as a human to court a farmer's daughter. This demon was Subodhi, whose story was both tragic and instructive. Subodhi had not always been a pig-like monster. In his previous existence, he had held the exalted position of Marshal Tianpeng, commander of the Jade Emperor's naval forces, and a respected member of the Celestial Court. However, his downfall had come at a royal banquet when, intoxicated by celestial wine, he had attempted to seduce Chang'e, the beautiful goddess of the moon. This offense against heavenly propriety had resulted in his immediate banishment from heaven. But in a cosmic mix-up during his reincarnation, his soul had ended up in the body of a pig, rather than returning to human form. The result was a being caught between two natures, possessing human intelligence and emotions while trapped in a monstrous pig-like appearance. When Guanyin encountered Subodhi during her preparations for the scripture pilgrimage, she saw in him a perfect candidate for redemption. His exile from heaven paralleled Sun Wukong's punishment, while his genuinely repentant nature made him suitable for spiritual cultivation. She convinced him to abandon his demonic ways and await the coming of Tang Sanzang. The confrontation between Sun Wukong and Subodhi was initially hostile, as the pig demon did not recognize the changed Monkey King. But when Guanyin appeared to mediate, Subodhi willingly joined the pilgrimage. Tang Sanzang gave him the religious name Baji, meaning 8 precepts, referring to the basic Buddhist commandments he would need to follow. Subodhi brought his own considerable abilities to the group. His weapon was a 9-toothed rake that weighed over 5,000 pounds, and he possessed 36 transformations, half of Sun Wukong's 72. More importantly, his previous experience as a celestial marshal gave him knowledge of heaven's bureaucracy and military tactics that would prove valuable. However, Subodhi also brought considerable character flaws that would provide both comic relief and moral instruction throughout the journey. He was lazy, gluttonous, lecherous, and prone to complaining about the hardships of their pilgrimage. These weaknesses made him a perfect foil to Sun Wukong's growing discipline and served as examples of the kind of behavior the pilgrims needed to overcome. The third and final disciple joined their group at the Flowing Sands River, where a fearsome ogre had been terrorizing travelers for years. This creature was Sha Wujing, whose fall from grace was perhaps the most poignant of all. Originally known as the curtain-lifting general, he had served in the Jade Emperor's throne room, responsible for drawing back the curtains around the imperial chariot. Sha Wujing's banishment had resulted from a single moment of clumsiness during a peach banquet. While serving at the feast, he had accidentally knocked over and shattered a crystal goblet belonging to the Queen Mother of the West. This seemingly minor offense had been judged harshly by the Celestial Court, resulting in his exile to Earth and transformation into a hideous sand demon. Unlike his companions, Sha Wujing had not sought to cause trouble during his exile. He had simply retreated to the remote flowing sands river, living in isolation and attacking only those who attempted to cross his domain. His loneliness and regret had made him eager to accept Guanyin's offer of redemption through service to the Buddhist mission. When Tang Sanzang's party reached the river, the confrontation with Sha Wujing was brief. Sun Wukong and Zhu Baji quickly subdued him, and once his identity was revealed, he readily agreed to join their pilgrimage. Tang Sanzang gave him the name Wujing, meaning awakened to purity, symbolizing his potential for spiritual cleansing. Sha Wujing became the most reliable and obedient of the three disciples. His weapon was a magical staff, and he possessed 18 transformations, along with exceptional skill in water combat. More importantly, his gentle nature and diplomatic skills made him the peacekeeper of the group, often mediating disputes between Sun Wukong and Zhu Baji. The final member of their party was not a disciple but a mount, a white dragon horse who was actually the third son of the Dragon King of the West Sea. This dragon prince had been sentenced to death for accidentally destroying a valuable pearl, but Guanyin had commuted his sentence to service in the pilgrimage. Transformed into a horse, he carried Tang Sanzang throughout their journey, providing both transportation and occasional combat assistance when he resumed his dragon form. Chapter 10. The Perilous Journey West. With their group complete, the pilgrims embarked on what would become one of the most epic journeys in all of literature. Their destination was Lei-Yin Temple in India, where the Buddha himself would bestow upon them the authentic Buddhist scriptures. But the path ahead was fraught with dangers that would test not only their physical courage, but their spiritual resolve. The journey was structured around 81 tribulations, a number chosen for its spiritual significance in Chinese numerology. Each trial was designed to purify the pilgrims' souls and prepare them for the sacred knowledge they sought. These challenges took many forms: ferocious demons who sought to devour Tang Sanzang for his holy flesh, treacherous terrain that defied normal travel, seductive spirits who tried to lead them astray, and internal conflicts that threatened to tear the group apart. One of their most famous early encounters involved the White Bone Demon, a shape-shifting fiend who appeared to them disguised as various innocent humans. First, she took the form of a young maiden offering them food, then an elderly woman searching for her daughter, and finally an old man looking for his wife and child. Each time, Sun Wukong's golden eyes saw through her deception, and he struck her down. But each time she escaped, leaving behind what appeared to be the corpse of an innocent person. Tang Sanzang, unable to see through the demon's illusions, was horrified by what seemed to be Sun Wukong's murder of innocent people. Despite his disciples' explanations, the monk's compassionate nature made it impossible for him to accept that such violence could be justified. This led to one of the most significant crises in their relationship, with Tang Sanzang temporarily banishing Sun Wukong from the group. This episode illustrated one of the central themes of the journey to the West: the tension between compassion and wisdom, between the appearance of things and their true nature. Sun Wukong's fiery golden eyes, gained through his suffering in Laozi's furnace, allowed him to see spiritual truth that others missed. But this gift also placed upon him the burden of taking actions that others might not understand. Another significant trial took place at the Flaming Mountains, where the pilgrims found their path blocked by a barrier of eternal fire. These mountains burned with such intensity that no living being could pass through them. The flames were the result of Sun Wukong's own past actions, When he had kicked over Laozi's furnace during his rampage through heaven, some of the coals had fallen to earth and created this fiery obstacle. To pass through the flames, they needed the magical palm leaf fan belonging to Princess Ironfan. However, this presented a complex problem, as Princess Ironfan was the wife of the Bull Demon King, and their son was Red Boy, a powerful demon whom Sun Wukong had previously defeated. The resulting conflict involved elaborate deceptions, fierce battles, and ultimately required the intervention of both Guanyin and other celestial beings. The Flaming Mountains episode demonstrated how the consequences of past actions can create obstacles in the present, and how redemption sometimes requires confronting those we have wronged. It also showed the importance of cooperation and the willingness to seek help from others when individual strength proves insufficient. Throughout their journey, the pilgrims encountered demons who were often fallen celestial beings or escaped magical creatures from heaven. The yellow wind monster had once been a marten who stole oil from Buddha's lamps. The goldfish spirit was a goldfish from Guanyin's pond who had transformed into a powerful demon. The spider spirits were 7 sisters who had achieved immortality through Taoist practices, but had chosen to use their powers for evil. These encounters served multiple purposes in the narrative. They provided exciting action sequences that kept readers engaged, but they also illustrated moral and spiritual lessons. Many of the demons represented different aspects of human weakness: greed, lust, pride, anger, and ignorance. By defeating these external enemies, the pilgrims were symbolically conquering their own internal flaws. The relationships between the 4 main characters evolved throughout their journey. Sun Wukong gradually learned to control his temper and pride, accepting Tang Sanzang's authority even when he disagreed with his master's decisions. Zhubaji's complaints and laziness provided comic relief, but also showed a very human struggle with the demands of spiritual discipline. Sha Wujing's steady reliability anchored the group during times of crisis. Tang Sanzang himself underwent significant development during the journey. While he began as a somewhat naive and overly trusting monk, the trials of the pilgrimage taught him to balance compassion with wisdom. He learned to rely on his disciples' unique abilities while maintaining his moral authority as their spiritual guide. Chapter 11. Spiritual Transformation and Enlightenment. As the pilgrims progressed on their westward journey, the true purpose of their trials became increasingly clear. The 81 tribulations were not arbitrary obstacles, but carefully designed tests that would purify their souls and prepare them for the ultimate gift of enlightenment. Each challenge they faced was an opportunity to shed old patterns of behavior and embrace higher spiritual principles. For Sun Wukong, this transformation was perhaps the most dramatic. The arrogant rebel who had once proclaimed himself equal to heaven gradually learned the virtues of humility, loyalty, and selfless service. His relationship with Tang Sanzang evolved from reluctant obedience enforced by the Golden Circlet to genuine respect and affection. He began to understand that true strength lay not in dominating others, but in protecting the innocent and serving a higher purpose. This change was not without its struggles. Sun Wukong's fiery nature and quick temper occasionally caused conflicts with his companions, particularly when his protective instincts clashed with Tang Sanzang's merciful approach to their enemies. However, each crisis ultimately strengthened their bond and deepened Sun Wukong's spiritual understanding. The pilgrim's journey was also marked by moments of profound spiritual insight. In temples and monasteries along the way, they encountered wise masters who shared teachings about the nature of reality, the illusion of the ego, and the path to enlightenment. These philosophical interludes provided balance to the action-packed demon battles and allowed for deeper character development. One of the most significant aspects of Sun Wukong's transformation was his growing compassion for all living beings. The monkey who had once carelessly killed his enemies began to seek non-violent solutions whenever possible. He learned to see past the monstrous appearances of demons to understand the suffering that had driven them to evil. This shift from judgment to understanding represented a crucial step in his spiritual evolution. The relationship between the 4 companions deepened into genuine brotherhood over the course of their journey. Despite their different personalities and frequent disagreements, they learned to work together as a unified team. Sun Wukong's leadership abilities, Zhu Baji's earthy humor, Xia Wujing's steady reliability, and Tang Sanzang's moral guidance created a perfect balance that allowed them to overcome challenges that none could have faced alone. Their trials also taught them important lessons about the nature of illusion and reality. Many of their enemies were masters of deception, creating elaborate false scenarios designed to trap the pilgrims. Learning to see through these illusions required not only Sun Wukong's golden vision, but also the development of spiritual insight that could distinguish between appearance and truth. As they neared their destination, the pilgrims began to understand that their journey had changed them in fundamental ways. They were no longer the same beings who had set out from China years earlier. Each trial had stripped away layers of ego, selfishness, and delusion, revealing their true spiritual nature beneath. Chapter 12: The Sacred Scriptures and Divine Recognition. After 14 years of arduous travel, countless battles, and profound spiritual trials, the pilgrims finally reached their destination, Lei Yin Temple in the Western Paradise, the sacred realm where the Buddha resided. The temple itself was a marvel beyond earthly description, with towering spires that seemed to touch the heavens and halls filled with golden light that emanated peace and wisdom. The Buddha received them with infinite compassion, recognizing immediately how much they had grown during their journey. He saw in Tang Sanzang a monk whose faith had been tested and purified through hardship. In Sun Wukong, he saw the transformation of a proud rebel into a loyal protector, whose strength was now guided by wisdom. Zhu Bajie and Xia Wujing had also been purified of their grosser nature, ready to embrace higher spiritual responsibilities. However, the Buddha had one final test for them. When the pilgrims were first presented with the sacred scriptures, they discovered that the texts were blank. This apparent mockery of their long journey initially caused distress, but the Buddha explained that these wordless texts contained the highest truth, the recognition that ultimate wisdom cannot be captured in mere words, but must be experienced directly. Nevertheless, understanding that the people of China needed concrete teachings they could study and follow, the Buddha eventually provided them with written scriptures. These texts contained the essential Buddhist teachings that would help countless souls achieve enlightenment. The pilgrims reverently accepted these sacred books, understanding the immense responsibility that came with bringing such precious knowledge back to their homeland. The return journey to China was swift and miraculous, accomplished through divine intervention rather than the slow overland route they had taken westward. This symbolized their transformation from ordinary beings struggling through worldly obstacles to enlightened beings capable of transcending normal limitations. Upon their return to China, Emperor Taizong received them with great honor and celebration. The sacred scriptures were deposited in temples throughout the empire, where they would serve as sources of spiritual guidance for generations of seekers. The success of their mission brought immeasurable benefit to countless people who would find solace and wisdom in the Buddhist teachings. But the most significant reward came from the Buddha himself. In recognition of their spiritual achievement and selfless service, each of the pilgrims was granted a form of enlightenment appropriate to their nature and accomplishments. Tang Sanzang, whose pure faith and unwavering dedication had guided the entire mission, was elevated to the status of Buddha, specifically granted the title Sandalwood Merit Buddha. This recognition acknowledged not only his role in bringing the scriptures to China, but also his personal achievement in overcoming the trials that had perfected his spiritual development. Sun Wukong received perhaps the most remarkable transformation of all. The being who had once rebelliously declared himself great sage equal to heaven was now truly granted a status approaching that lofty title. He was made Buddha of victorious strife, a recognition of his hard-won victory over his own ego and violent nature. This title acknowledged that his greatest triumph had not been his legendary battles against demons and celestial armies, but his conquest of his own pride and anger. Zhu Baji, despite his continued tendency toward laziness and gluttony, was recognized for his loyalty and his gradual spiritual progress throughout the journey. He was appointed cleanser of the altars, a position that, while more humble than his companions' titles, acknowledged his sincere efforts to reform his character. Sha Wujing's steady devotion and peaceful nature earned him the status of Arhat, a high level of Buddhist enlightenment. His transformation from a lonely, bitter exile to a compassionate protector exemplified the power of redemption through selfless service. Even the white dragon horse was rewarded for his faithful service, being restored to his dragon form and elevated to the status of one of the 8 heavenly dragon kings. Epilogue. The Eternal Legacy. The story of Sun Wukong and the journey to the West represents far more than an adventure tale. It is a profound allegory about the human condition, the struggle between our lower and higher natures, and the possibility of spiritual transformation through dedication and service. Sun Wukong's character arc from rebellious trickster to enlightened protector mirrors the journey that every soul must take towards spiritual maturity. His initial rebellion against heaven represents the ego's rejection of natural law and cosmic order. His imprisonment under 5 Elements Mountain symbolizes the suffering that inevitably follows when we act from pride rather than wisdom. His eventual redemption through service to a higher cause demonstrates that even the most fallen being can achieve enlightenment through sincere effort and dedication. The relationships between the 4 pilgrims illustrate different aspects of the spiritual path. Tongsan Zhang represents faith and moral guidance, the spiritual teacher who provides direction but must rely on others for protection. Sun Wukong embodies power and wisdom united in service, showing how strength becomes truly valuable when guided by compassion. Zhu Baji represents the ordinary person's struggle with earthly desires and human weaknesses. Sha Wujing symbolizes steady devotion and the quiet virtues that support any spiritual community. Their trials on the journey represent the challenges we all face in life, the temptations that would lead us astray, the obstacles that test our resolve, and the internal conflicts that must be resolved before we can achieve peace. The 81 tribulations they endured remind us that spiritual growth requires patience, persistence, and the willingness to face our fears and limitations. The story's enduring popularity across centuries and cultures testifies to its universal themes. Sun Wukong has become one of the most recognizable figures in world literature, inspiring countless adaptations in theater, film, television, video games, and other media. His image as the playful yet powerful monkey who challenges authority while ultimately serving justice resonates with people of all ages and backgrounds. In Chinese culture, Sun Wukong represents the ideal of the hero who fights against oppression and protects the innocent. His rebellious spirit appeals to those who struggle against unjust authority, while his eventual enlightenment offers hope that even the most difficult personalities can find redemption. His loyalty to Tongsan Zhang demonstrates the importance of choosing worthy causes and serving them with complete dedication. The philosophical depth of Journey to the West ensures its continued relevance in modern times. Its exploration of themes like the nature of reality, the relationship between power and responsibility, the importance of friendship and cooperation, and the possibility of personal transformation speaks to contemporary concerns about leadership, ethics, and spiritual meaning. Sun Wukong's golden eyes, gained through suffering and trial, represent the wisdom that comes only through experience. His ability to see through illusions and recognize the truth hidden beneath appearances makes him a symbol of enlightened perception. In our age of information, overload, and competing narratives, his gift of clear sight becomes even more valuable. The Monkey King's transformation from chaos bringer to protector offers hope for anyone who feels they have made irredeemable mistakes. His story suggests that no one is beyond redemption if they are willing to acknowledge their faults, accept guidance from wiser beings, and dedicate themselves to serving something greater than their own desires. As we conclude this epic tale, we are reminded that the greatest journeys are not those that take us to distant lands, but those that transform us from within. Sun Wukong's pilgrimage to the West was ultimately a journey toward his own enlightened nature. His legend continues to inspire us to undertake our own spiritual quests, to face our inner demons with courage, and to serve the highest good with wisdom and compassion. The Monkey King's story is eternal because it speaks to the eternal potential within each of us, the possibility of rising above our limitations, overcoming our selfishness, and achieving a state of being that benefits not only ourselves but all the world. In Sun Wukong, we see both what we are and what we might become. Thanks for watching Eternal Philosophies. Please like, share, and subscribe.